Evidence that long feared, long rumored, not safe for work project Shutdown may have already started. For the first time in a while, I can say definitively, yes, I have an example of a project that was shut down, and was shut down explicitly, with the reasoning being the content of the project. It's not clear why that one project was picked. It is also clear that there is not some site-wide massive shutdown thing that is just going into effect. Kickstarter cannot work if it becomes commonplace for a creator to launch a project, have it fund, promote, and advertise, and to go through all of what we go through to get a project funded, and then have that thing get shut down at the last minute. Today, I want to do a little deep dive into some comics crowdfunding and Kickstarter news, particularly around a topic that has been something that we've been speculating on and talking about lately, and that is the idea, the rumor that not safe for work projects would soon be under new rules, that Kickstarter would be cracking down on not safe for work comics, and that there are big changes to come to the platform. And so about a month ago, I went live here and sort of dove into this and shared some of the rumors that I had been hearing about reaching out to creators, encouraging them, or strongly recommending, or in some cases not approving projects until they made some changes to their project pages. And also saying that, hey, we may be facing tougher scrutiny from Stripe, our payment processors, and so that's why you want to make these changes. And there was also some speculation of seeing less not safe for work projects on Kickstarter, or if there were some times over the past month or two that some creators had said, hey, it seems like when I'm scrolling that Kickstarter might be hiding these projects, or shadow banning them, or they're just less apparent, less in my face. Is that going on? And so about a month ago, we dove all into that. And one of the things that I basically left a month ago was with the feeling that these rumors are definitely true. And when you look at Stripe's terms of service, and you look at the power disparity between Stripe and Kickstarter, that one, Stripe really does call the shots, and Kickstarter is limited as to what they can do or how they could potentially battle back against Stripe. Stripe is the more powerful entity in this case. And then two, when you actually look at Stripe's terms of service, which we did in that session, well, many of the Kickstarter projects that were alive and funding in that category, well, they were in violation of Stripe's specific terms of service. And so it would not be shocking if Kickstarter projects start getting shut down, or if Stripe is taking more of a stance on this, or if they're enforcing this more. But I did leave that saying, until we start seeing these actual projects get banned, or an actual slapdown coming, or Kickstarter coming out and explicitly saying, hey, there are new rules in place, that I didn't actually think there might be anything going on here, other than maybe just trying to be cognizant that Stripe and other entities may be paying a little bit more attention. And so that's sort of where I stood a month ago. Well, but one thing that I did say was that we've got to start seeing some examples of projects that are getting funded or that are funded and then getting shut down before we can jump and panic. And I totally understand that this is a very important topic, because there are awesome creators out there like Jeff Messer. What's up, Jeff? Also ComixLaunch Pro member. But Jeff says, I'm preparing a new Not Safe for Work campaign and hope to submit it for approval by next week. So I'm about to find out what the changes may be. Yeah, so we're going to dive into this, Jeff, and hopefully I'll give you some guidance by the end of this stream for at least what I would do in this situation, even though we are still in a world where there are still a lot of questions to be answered. But so what I want to do is answer the question now, are projects being shut down? And for the first time in a while, I can say definitively, yes, I have an example of a project that was shut down as a result of this, and was shut down explicitly with with the reasoning being the content of the project. And but it played out a little bit interestingly. So what I want to do is I want to just lay out the facts and the timeline of this one particular instance and this one particular project, and then we'll try to extrapolate, explain why this happened to this project. We'll also answer the question, have all not safe for work projects been shut down on Kickstarter, or is that coming? What's going on? We'll try to answer the question, well, if not everybody is being shut down, why are some being shut down and others not being shut down? I have a theory about what's going on here. I also want to talk about, because in my community, we had a really good discussion and robust discussion about, well, does this mean that we need alternatives either to Kickstarter for other crowdfunders or alternative payment processors that we need to look at? And we'll talk a little bit about why there's not a lot of clear, clean answers there. And then I'm also going to sort of share a little bit about what I would do if I was in a creator's like Jeff's position and had this kind of project, but also talk about how we may be in a sort of state where creators are going to be playing not safe for work project Russian roulette here, and that this uncertainty, while less than ideal, it may still be how things are for the foreseeable future. So I'm definitely going to dive into all of this, but let's talk and let's start with the example of a project that got shut down for not safe for work. And so this is a project from a creator who, I'll be honest, I was not familiar with prior to this, but this is someone that the creator's name is Steve K of Deep Cover Studios. And this is not a first-time creator. Steve Kupazuski has actually launched 5 projects. It looks like all of them successfully funded. I believe Steve has a good track record of delivering on past projects for his backers. And so this was the project, Deep Cover Studios Anthology #1. Now, if you look at the actual Kickstarter campaign, what it'll look like is that this was a successfully funded project. If you check out the updates, you'll see from a timeline standpoint, this was a project that launched on April 20th of 2024. It was sort of your standard 30-day Kickstarter launch that ran 30 days and ended on May 20th, 2024. And it says it's 28 backers pledged, $700. So on the grand scheme of things, not a huge Kickstarter, 28 backers, $705. Not from Kickstarter standpoint or from, even comics Kickstarter standpoint, it's not a massive project. But again, that's no shade on Steve or anybody at Deep Cover Studios. I am personally someone that thinks it's awesome that Kickstarter exists for projects of all sizes. But this was a project that's it funded, actually, if you look at the timeline, this wasn't a last minute fund either. This was a project that actually funded within the first 12 hours. Kind of a weird, when you look at the Kickstarter mapping and funding progress, it's actually kind of a weird chart where this project hit its $500 goal right there on day 1, had a decent day 3, and then 3 weeks of crickets and pretty much flatlined, and then had a small bump on the final day. In looking at what actually happened here, it really did seem like that an issue really struck on the final day of this game. Going over to Steve's Facebook page, you'll see on May 20th, Steve posted this. He said, "Anyone else having issues with Kickstarter payments? First, I had backers unable to pledge to my campaign. My project due to payment errors. I opened a ticket while the Kickstarter was still live, but Kickstarter support did nothing to fix it. Now that the Kickstarter is over and funded, every single backer is errored out. I opened a second ticket, which was then solved and nothing fixed. I just did a follow-up to that ticket, have yet to receive any kind of response. I'm beyond pissed off with the lack of support Kickstarter is offering. I'd love to know how much money my project lost to this error, and with backers not saying anything, and I just gave up. I know I lost about $500 in canceled pledges, which is a lot for a tiny company to lose. So what I'm hearing here is that even before Steve's campaign ended, he was getting notices from prospective backers that on that last day, they were unable to pledge or have their pledges completed on his campaign. And then Steve followed up by saying that and shared more details that after the campaign is over, we know what usually happens after a campaign is over. As soon as the campaign ends, Kickstarter tries to charge all of the credit cards that you have on file. Now, most creators will find that with that first attempt at charge, anywhere between 90 and 95% of the charges will just go through no problem. And that usually there's anywhere between 5 and 10% that are errored. And then over the next week, Kickstarter tries to correct that error, get it fixed. Sometimes that means just charging it again when there's more funds on the card. Sometimes that means backers actually updating their expiration dates or adding a new card. But you've got a 7-day window to do this. But one thing that I've never seen, and most creators have never seen, is that when the campaign ends and Kickstarter tries to charge your backers, every single one of the backers pledges errored. Like, I've never seen that. I've never heard of that happening. That suggests that there's something wrong overall, not just a happenstance where every backer had a errored credit card. That's just not going to happen. So definitely suggested that something was wrong. Now, to go back to Steve's timeline here, a few days after that, May 22nd, so 2 days after his campaign ended, Steve received a response from Kickstarter Trust and Safety. He said, "Hi there. Thank you for your patience. We're sorry about what's going on. We're working on escalating this issue to Stripe, as it appears there's a mistake over on their end. We will continue to advocate for your work and remind them that you've had multiple successful campaigns in the past. Unfortunately, seeing as the project has ended, the project will need to be relaunched because Stripe has disabled the credit card transfers on their end. The errored payments will not process. We greatly apologize for this experience and will follow up as soon as we hear back from Stripe about what happened. Best, Kickstarter Trust and Safety." So on the one hand, the good news is it wasn't anybody on Kickstarter that slapped Steve's project. Kickstarter reported that there was an issue at Stripe. Now, on May 22nd, it sounded like Kickstarter was both saying, well, we're elevating this with Stripe, but also that you might have to relaunch your project. That seemed like an insane response to me. And as far as I know, like, Stripe, even if pledges or credit cards don't get charged, all of that information should be retained. There should be tokens. There should be things on the back end, so that unless this was intentional on someone from Stripe's viewpoint, there's no reason they shouldn't be able to recover these payments. At least that's what I understand. But Steve ended up getting further clarification a couple days after that. And he said this. He said, "So I just learned my account on Stripe has been disabled. This is why all my backer accounts were errored out." And this is what he got from Kickstarter. He said, "Hi again. Just a quick update that Stripe has since informed us that your account was disabled as adult-themed comics are not supportable on their platform. Should you choose to launch a comic that is not adult-themed, you are welcome to relaunch on Kickstarter. We apologize for any inconvenience." So that goes a long way, right? Best, Kickstarter Trust and Safety. So obviously, Steve on Facebook said, "I'm feeling pissed off." Totally understandable. And what Steve's saying is there's thousands of comics on Kickstarter with adult themes that have no problem getting funded. Why is Stripe censoring art they have no part of, other than making money to process payments? Every comic I've funded before has had some adult content and had 0 issues. There's tens of thousands of not safe for work comics on Kickstarter that have no problem getting funded. Anyone have any other Kickstarter funded sites that don't deal with Stripe and allow adult content?" So when Steve posted that a few days ago, he ended up jumping on a live stream, and I'll try to link up to that live stream that I caught some of. And there was also other creators that are obviously interested in this topic, and so you can actually hear from Steve on that live stream, and some other creators. And there was even the one of the creators and founders of fundmycomic.com, which is like a Kickstarter alternative that has tried to sort of pick up projects that Kickstarter, potentially would not launch. And so anyway, I'll link up to that stream if you want to check that out. But that's sort of Steve's statement here. And so there's some interesting questions that this raises, right? Because, all right, if they're coming after Steve, and this is not, presumably, this would not be the first project targeted if they were doing a massive raid on Not Safe for Work comics, right? A project with 28 backers, probably, if the goal was, all right, we are bringing the hammer down on Not Safe for Work projects, this probably wouldn't be where you'd start, right? But the question is, like, is Steve an outlier? Is he an anomaly? Like, was this a mistake? Or is there a Not Safe for Work project Shutdown going on Kickstarter? Well, I mean, the answer to that, you do not have to look very far. The answer to that is no. There is not suddenly a Not Safe for Work project ban on Kickstarter. A quick scroll through, we'll see a number of projects that are already playing in the Not Safe for Work comic space. The number 3 on Kickstarter right now is the latest from Brian Pulido, which is a Lady Death book that clearly has, the same naughty and nice covers that he usually does. In terms of adult content, there's graphic violence, obviously. So this has not been shut down. Miss Meow has, potentially, even more gratuitous and clearly, trending on the nudity and with the covers as well. Maybe not so much in the content of the book, but definitely the covers. And then the latest from Pat Shand, which just went live a little while ago, clearly sexual content covers, covers with a lot of censor bars. So it's clear kind of what they're offering. So none of these projects, as of right now, as of today, have been shut down. So what's going on here? And so then the question becomes, well, was there something particularly gratuitous about Deep Cover Studios Anthology #1 that needed to be shut down? And so, if you take a deep dive look at this book, it's like, okay, if I was going to make the case that this project has gone above and beyond what is acceptable over on Kickstarter, we can take a look at that as an idea, and I guess if I was going to make the Steelman case for why shut down this project and not others, well, it has, a topless, though censored with a Kickstarter bar, project image. Okay, that's one thing. This cover right here, basically, is about as gratuitous as you're going to get on a Kickstarter cover. So I guess that could be something. And then when you look at the comic book content itself, we've got, 1, 2, 3. Most of the preview pages do have some element of nudity with a little bit of very small censor bars, right? So I could see this project getting flagged. And again, it's important to go back to the terms of service for, if this is Stripe that is flagging this, it's important to look at what Stripe says. And what Stripe does clearly say in their terms of services that that their prohibited businesses is adult content and services. And one of the bullets under there is pornography and other mature audience content, including literature, imagery, and other media depicting nudity and or nudity or explicit sexual acts. So from a straight look at the definition of what Stripe is saying that their terms of service is, yeah, it's pretty clear that this project violates that or would potentially be in violation of by these strict definitions. This does. However, so does Lady Death, and so does Miss Meow, and so does Amorini. And I don't think there's any, reasonable argument that could be made to say that this project was so over the bounds and so wildly abusing the rules that this one needed to be shut down when many of the other projects on Kickstarter Discovery, you know, like this right here, like Cherry's Jubilee. And the creator for that often leaves a message on the ComixLaunch voicemail. Love it. Like, I'm not throwing any shade at any of these projects, but like a triple X comic anthology with rare errata covers by various artists with, censored nudity cover images, like this is clearly again in violation of Stripe. So it's not clear why, again, it's not clear why that one project was picked and others were not. And it is not, and so, but it is also clear that there is not some site-wide massive shutdown, or this is not a universal thing that has just gone into effect. It really does seem like there was this project that was targeted. Now, I have been hearing in other groups that, oh, I'm hearing it. This isn't that Deep Cover Studios Anthology #1 was not the only project targeted. And I have been hearing creators say that they've heard of 2 or 3 other projects that had this same issue where there was a Stripe cancellation, and even if the Kickstarter funded and they can't get their Kickstarter funds and nothing processed. Unfortunately, before I was able to go live here, I haven't been able to confirm what those are. So if that's you, if that's your project, if your project was shut down, or if you know of a project that had this happen other than this project, I'd like to hear about it, just because I'm trying to track this stuff and see what's going on so that we can keep the comic community just informed. But this is the only one that I've verified, that I've seen the creator sort of post screenshots, post communication, and share that this is an issue. All right. So one of the things that Steve had said, and sort of in his frustration and that he posted about, was that he said, and he asked the question, why was my Kickstarter targeted when Lady Death and so many others have not safe for work covers and continue to get funded? And then he sort of said, well, I do know why, but it's a double standard. If my Kickstarter did 10,000 plus in funding, I'm sure there wouldn't be any issues. All right. Now, totally get Steve's frustration, and I can imagine what it's like to get funded, have everything go through, like getting ready the next day to, send my printer files to the printer, or move ahead with fulfillment, only to find, like, after the campaign is over and after it's successful, oh wait, you're not getting any of this and you have to do it again. It's craziness. All right. So I can't imagine what he's thinking, but I do not buy that. Well, of course Kickstarter and of course Stripe is going to let Brian Pulido get away with it, but because he's a bigger creator. But we're going to hammer down and come down hard on the little guy. I don't buy that, for the simple reason that Stripe is a $14.4 billion company, billion with a B. And, on a $700 Kickstarter, like this Kickstarter from Steve, Stripe makes $24.50, right? So you could argue, well, obviously that's a drop in the bucket. They can afford to lose Steve's business, right? But for a $10,000 project, they would allow it. Well, on a $10,000 project, they make $350. Like, I don't really see a $14 billion company go ahead and changing their operations over that kind of difference. And then even when you say, well, what about Pulido's projects? Pulido's project's going to raise $300K. Stripe's going to make, again, Stripe makes a kind of a flat 3.5% about-ish on every project that's launched in processing fees. Well, on Pulido's project, $300K, that'd be about $10,000. $10,000 seems like a lot of money, and there's a lot of money to a lot of people. There's a lot of money. It would be a lot of money to me. It's a drop in the bucket in a $14 billion empire and a $14 billion processing company. And so I just don't see them operating at that kind of scale, where they would have, a threshold where when you make above this amount, we look the other way, because this amount, in the grand scheme of things, for everything they process, it's not that big. I don't buy that. But here's my theory. And again, I don't have any inside information on this, but reviewing the facts and reviewing what I know about how Kickstarter works, how Stripe works, and what's going on lately here, I do have a theory about what happened here. And so, and part of this is that I have noticed that there seems to be a little bit of a slight change in how and what happens when you submit a project for Kickstarter and Stripe review. So, what part of the process when you create a Kickstarter project and you start building it on Kickstarter, after you identify yourself and the entity that you are launching under, you're taken in the verification process and the payment process to, this is sort of the step before you upload your bank account, is that you have to make sure that you are connected to Stripe. And you do this on a project basis. You do this for every project. You don't do it just once and it's fine. Every single project, and every time you launch a project, you'll have to go hit a page that currently looks like this, where you're going to verify your personal details. You're going to give your legal name, an email address. You're going to provide date of birth, your home address, your phone number, and the last 4 digits of your social security. Now, when you hit continue, this is something that I do not believe that Kickstarter or Stripe has always asked for this. I believe this is somewhat new, but you're asked to provide some details about how you earn money with Kickstarter, and it asks you to submit a website. If you hit no URL, like you don't have a website, it allows you to describe your product, but it also says that if you're sharing a product description instead of a URL, you're confirming that you don't use a website, app, social media page, or online profile to promote or sell products and services. And that's not something that you want to say that you do, because you are using a website to sell your products, right? And so what most people will do here is they will put in a link to their current Kickstarter project, probably a link to the preview page, or that makes the most sense. I think some people might also link to their generic company website. So that would be another thing that you could do. So those are two things that you do, but everyone, in order to launch a Kickstarter project now, has to hit this page and should put a website in here. And so again, when I was just setting this up for a couple of projects, I just grabbed the link of my preview page for the particular project and linked to that, and then hit continue. And then after you hit continue, you sort of immediately are processed. So that tells me that no one over at Stripe is actually looking at whatever website that you put in here. No one's reviewing it. They're just basically running a check on your home address, your last 4, your social, your phone number, and your name. And if that checks out, you actually get verified and you can move on to the next part and can actually move ahead with submitting your project on Kickstarter. But Stripe is now taking URLs from websites and storing them presumably somewhere on their site, and likely reviewing them at some point in the future as a part of their sort of business auditing. And so I'm assuming, and again, I don't know this, I wasn't able to get this answer from Steve, but I would bet that when he set up his Stripe, he either submitted a link to Kickstarter project that he was going to be launching and shared a link to that, or he submitted a link to maybe his website that he uses for his Kickstarter. And I couldn't find a Deep Cover Studios URL, but I did find a Facebook page that he has. So it's possible that he linked to this or to this. But both of these sort of have the same content, and both of those you could find content that Stripe would determine is, again, against their terms of service. So what I think happened is that at some point during the launch, after Steve had launched, but towards the end of the campaign, or maybe even on that last day, someone at Stripe reviewed his project or reviewed the website that he linked to it, and determined that what he is selling, the products he is selling, are in violation of Stripe's terms of service. And they decided to, hit the cancel button, hit the shutdown button, and canceled his Stripe account. And that's why, and I believe they did this probably on or around the 20th, which was the day that his campaign ended. And that's why Steve likely saw that there were some errored pledges on his project while the campaign was still live and the people were having problems pledging to it. I'm guessing that Kickstarter doesn't really have a use case for projects that are that they approve, that connect successfully to Stripe, that launch, but sometime in the middle of the project, the connection between Stripe and Kickstarter is severed. I'm guessing that they might just not have the ability to sort of communicate that. And so when people are trying to submit and pledge for that project, and it was just automatically erroring. And then as soon as the campaign was over, Kickstarter's next thing is, all right, charge all these cards to Stripe, but because that Stripe account was turned off, canceled, suspended, however it was going to be laid out. When Kickstarter tried to charge all those cards, the connection wasn't there, everything errored, and that's why that happened. All right. And so my guess is that Deep Cover Studios and Steve just got unlucky in that his project was or his account was probably pulled at random from the millions and millions of Stripe accounts that are out there. I'm sure that a small number of them get audited within 30 days, and he probably just lucked out or did not luck out, and his got picked, reviewed while his project was still live, and shut down. And that just kind of randomly, not randomly, but he got unlucky. He was unluckily picked, and that's what severed the issue. Now, Steve has since been posting updates to his group, and informing his 28 backers, and he's been sort of sharing the updates that he was sharing on Facebook, but also sharing this with his Kickstarter backers. It sounds like the most recent thing was that he was able to speak with Stripe, and they were able to look into the issue. And he says, I'm now waiting on Stripe. He said, so I'm waiting on Kickstarter to count Stripe with my account info to get it reinstated. Nothing will probably happen until at least Monday, as Kickstarter takes the weekend off. His response from Steve, it was like, hi, Steve, thanks for reaching out to Stripe. According to our specialized teams, it looks like the account that you're referring to is account, which was a custom connected account that is connected to Kickstarter. Having said that, I'm instructed to inform you that the platform where this Stripe account is connected should reach out to us for your account to be reinstated. We look forward to your response. And so I guess I'm curious to see. So it sounds like Steve's next steps is he's going to try to get Kickstarter to get his account reinstated, and he is going to relaunch. He says, once my account is reinstated, I will relaunch with bigger sensors on the art being displayed. However, there will be no changes to the art inside the book. I will not allow a company or a single person to tell me what I can or cannot draw or write. Stripe has zero say in the issue. They process payments. That's it. They do not get to dictate what I or anyone else does to make money, as long as it's legal in my country. As a backup, I will also be launching on Fund My Comic Kickstarter on their platform, which will expire 5 days after the Kickstarter does. This will be a backup in case Stripe or Kickstarter does the same thing. Again, at the end of the campaign, and to block and disable pledges. 30 days running a Kickstarter is a lot of work, but I put in another 30 days to get my books out into the world. Marvel and DC won't give you this content or these kinds of stories, so it's up to us, the little guys, to fill that slot. So that's how Steve is breaking this down for his audience and what he's doing. Now, the curious thing is that Fund My Comic, their primary, as far as I know, their primary payment processor is also Stripe. So while I'm not, and even though I watched some of the stream, and I understand that they are also potentially looking at other payment processors, it's not clear how much backup launching on a separate platform or a backup platform at the same time will actually give Steve. But I wish him well. I hope it works out. But I want to talk a little bit because this sort of has brought up a pretty good question in my group is like, oh, okay, well, if this is going down, or if Steve is just the first of many to come, do we need to be looking at other crowdfunding platforms? Should we, jump ship? Is it time to jump ship? Is it time to move? And should we jump to Indiegogo or BackerKit or Crowdfunder or Fund My Comic or any of the others? The problem with that move is that all of those crowdfunding platforms use Stripe. Stripe is the biggest game in town when it comes to these kinds of transactions. And so it's not a clear that using those is the answer. Now you may say, well, Tyler, some of those platforms also support PayPal. Is PayPal the answer? And I had to think about that, and I needed to look in that real quick. But if you go and actually look at PayPal's terms of service, which I did, you will find that PayPal also has a policy on transactions that involve sexually oriented goods and services, which they consider sexually oriented digital goods or content delivered to digital mediums include downloadable pictures or videos or website services or goods or services that involve or appear to involve minors, obviously that. And so potentially PayPal, it seems like PayPal would potentially allow you to send physical products only to backers in the US, but would not allow you to take international funds or international backing for not this kind of content. And they also would not let you to sell any digital for this kind of content. So it's not clear that just jumping ship to our pals at PayPal would be the answer here. Now, are there other alternatives? I mean, everybody, you understand that, and we all hear how the most lucrative thing that you can get on the internet is pornography, right? So how are, these giant porn sites able to collect? I probably should say corn, because I think that word gets throttled on a lot of algorithms. But how are those sites able to thrive and make so much money? And the reality is there are a lot of other alternatives in terms of payment processors, but a lot of these are considered or called high risk payment processors that have high risk merchant accounts. And when you're looking at those accounts, the fees are a lot higher, like upward in many cases. Just getting started with those payment processors are going to require like a down payment of like $1,000. And then they might take as much as 30% to process what they consider to be high risk transactions, because a lot of times in the adult space, those are among the most highest charged back items. You can just imagine, the how many people out there like get discovered, their habit discovered by a spouse or significant other, and they have to say, oh no, somebody stole my account, that wasn't me. Right. So there's a lot of chargebacks in this space. And so that was definitely, those options are out there, but we're not talking 3% of funds raised. You're talking a serious commitment to more. And so there's so the idea of just a quick and easy alternative definitely doesn't seem to be the case. There are also a few misconceptions out there that I want to talk about. And first is like, I've seen some creators like just really getting up in arms and saying Kickstarter shouldn't censor, and to be honest, like this isn't a Kickstarter thing. Like Kickstarter doesn't want to censor in most cases. They have a pretty broad terms of service of what they allow. Yes, there are the occasional projects that are deemed sort of, culturally insensitive or violate some terms, like Kickstarter's not a place for hate speech, and they will monitor projects that they feel like violate some of those things. There's also some content that is beyond the pale for Kickstarter, but for the most part, they've tend to be pretty hands off with this stuff up until now. But it really has come down to Stripe. And if you actually look at Kickstarter's responses to Steve, they pretty much shifted everything to Stripe and just saying, hey, your product, your project is not supported by the Stripe platform, but it has nothing to do with us. I had another creator then say, well, Stripe, like, where does Stripe get off? And you saw it in Steve's language. Another creator say, Stripe only processes payments, but now they're not processing a payment because they don't like what a business produces. That's strange. They shouldn't be in the business of censoring either. They have no they should have no control over what I write or draw. Like, you've heard that sentiment. Or that another creator wrote, it's unbelievable to me that Stripe, a corporation, would consider it their duty to censor content in that manner. I'm not sure where to start with my rage for that ideology. And so I get that, a lot of us are like, hands off my comics. Don't moralize me. Don't be the moral police for me. But then when you actually look at it, it turns out it's not even Stripe that is the main reason why Stripe is doing this. It's actually Visa and MasterCard and the major banks who have prohibitions against adult content. You can search the internet and find a lot of examples of Stripe you can find examples of Chase Bank coming down hard and shutting down personal bank accounts of people that they discover were doing sex work or were adult entertainers. Clay Adams, who I mentioned earlier, he's got the Dream Quest book that is out now. When he was going to set up a bank account and for Fried Comics, when he was launching Fried Comics, he was asked, well, hey, to set up the bank account, one of the people at the bank said, well, what kind of comics do you make? And his response was, well, we make pulp fiction for mature readers, which was sort of the Fried Comics tagline. And he said he thinks it was the mature readers line that got their spider sense tingling. And then he had to go answer a lot of questions that was really, it was pretty clear that it was designed to find out, like, oh, is Fried Comics really just making, pornography or that kind of comics? What was it, making adult themed comics? And with the feeling being that Chase was not going to give him a bank account so that he could connect it to Kickstarter because of the content that he was making. And again, it does seem a little bit, I totally get the argument that it seems hypocritical that your Visas and your MasterCards, they can be used on some of these high risk sites. It's just that they have to go through these intermediaries that then charge you through the nose. So it's like they're profiting off charging more for these high risk things, but they're still ultimately, allowed to get there. Many of the pornography sites out there, when you get charged, it's actually, there's sort of like, there's an intermediary company that will show up on your bill for Visa and MasterCard. That's not the company that's actually charging it. And it's that's sort of how they hide the transactions. Yeah, it's frustrating, but that's sort of the world that we live in. But it's not as simple as just saying, well, Stripe is in the wrong, because they're operating in this world where the major financial institutions out there are very, very against this stuff. And so that's also why, part of the reason why cryptocurrencies exist is because there are a lot of products out there that the major payment processors or financial institutions want zero part of. All right. And so again, that's sort of what we're at, where we're at. So Jay Burns says, this might just be the start, and there might have been more of an uproar if they had targeted Brian, Bad Bug, or Pat Shand. Well, I mean, it's absolutely true. Like, I think most creators probably have not heard of this creator's experience. I guarantee you, if it was the latest from Bad Bug, the latest from Pat Shand and Cheeky Comics, or certainly the latest from Brian Pulido, this would be headline news and would be a huge deal, and everyone would have heard about this story right now. Again, I don't buy that there's anybody over at Stripe that is like, oh yeah, all right, we don't want to make too much of a fuss, so let's go after this $700 project and not this, $60,000 project or $30,000 project or $240,000 project because we can't, upset, 25 or 30-year veteran Brian Polito. Like, I don't think there's anybody at Stripe, doing this review stuff. I don't think they're thinking twice about it. I just think with the millions of people and projects that are connecting to Stripe all over the internet at any given time, the chances that Pat or Brian Polito's project comes up for review is probably just, the odds probably are just pretty low. But I do think if this project from Pat Shand got reviewed by the same person that at Stripe that reviewed Deep Cover, yeah, this would probably get shut down based on what I know, or based on what I'm speculating. And again, I have no inside info on this. That's just my guess. So one question that came up in my group is well, does this mean that all adult themed content is now in danger? And the answer to that is definitely no. Like, adult themed content is such a broad term, and that is what Kickstarter replied to Steve with. He said, adult themed content on Stripe is not allowed. But Stripe, when you do look at their terms of service, it is clearer than that, and it really does come around to images, media depicting nudity or explicit sexual acts. So I do believe if your web presence does not explicitly show nudity and explicit acts, then you're probably not in danger at all of getting shut down. But I do know that some creators are sort of having flashbacks to when Patreon did a soft purge and of some of the adult content creation over there, and sort of hurt things there. And it seemed that also seemed very arbitrary to a lot of creators, where some creators were able to continue going and others felt like they got shut down. And that's really where I want to get to and wrap up here, is that this really does just seem like an awful situation, because the idea for Kickstarter to work, like, Kickstarter cannot work if it becomes commonplace for a creator to launch a project, have it get accepted, have it fund, do everything that you do during a launch to promote and to advertise and to go through all of what we go through to get a project funded, and then have that thing get shut down at the last minute. Like, that can't be common occurrence. Those ad dollars that you advertise during a campaign to drive traffic to your Kickstarter, like, that's not recoverable. And there is a big cost of switching platforms, and there is a big challenge with, if something like this happens, of like communicating the situation to your backers. It creates a lot of uncertainty, and there's like, is this just the luck of the draw? And then how infinitesimal are the odds, or how common are the odds? Like what are the chances that this is going to happen to your project? And it does seem like Kickstarter needs to, and also when this happens, it also seems like Kickstarter really does not have many things that they can do to make the situation right. Kickstarter's not going to come out and just refund, or they're not going to make that creator whole for a project that wasn't able to fund it, because they, deep in Kickstarter's terms of service, basically they will pass the buck to Stripe. And Stripe is also a big enough company that they're probably not going to bend over backwards if in any, to say, oh, it was our bad. Now, I will be interested to see if Steve's able to get his account reinstated, and if that but like, it'd be one thing if he could get reinstated and then recharge all those projects and it just goes through, and that would essentially mean that they've rescinded their revocation. They've rescinded their and basically said that his project did not violate it. Or they could just reconnect his and reactivate his account, but require that changes be made on what he's showing on Kickstarter. And so What I think should happen is that Kickstarter needs to get really clear about what is and isn't allowable on their platform. And they need to be proactive about what creators can do to avoid this. And this should include sharing images and this and okay, not okay, and they should be really clear about this. From what I have seen, I saw that John Delaraz on his website had reached out to Sam, who is the new head of comics, for comment on this, and that he reported that Sam said that the Kickstarter has no changes isn't planning on making any changes in place about what projects are or not supportable on their platform from their end. But if they do make changes, that they will get the word out about it. So as of right now, I haven't seen any that Kickstarter has put anything out, but I do think that this will become even more of an important thing for Kickstarter to get a handle on, especially considering that Kickstarter is getting into the advertising game for project creators. Kickstarter announced that they have a new Kickstarter performance team, which is basically an in-house digital marketing agency for crowdfunders that presumably they will be taking money from creators to promote their Kickstarter projects. And I couldn't imagine a situation where one of these not safe for work projects who are, who could really benefit from digital advertising potentially. Well, they go and they give thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars that Kickstarter is processing on their behalf. And then for them to say, oh, well, Stripe shut us down. Sorry, you're out of luck, but you still owe us all this money for advertising, even though we're not going to get anything back because the campaign didn't succeed because it got shut down. That would be like make creators, just even that more upset. So I do think this is something that Kickstarter should get their head around and really be proactive about. What do I think is going to happen, though? I don't think Kickstarter is going to say much. I think unless this becomes a super common thing, I think Kickstarter is just going to try to let it go by. And when Stripe bans projects, they're going to pass the buck to Stripe. And so we may be entering an era where creators are sort of playing not safe for work comic Russian roulette. And I think that if 99 out of 100 not safe for work comic projects launch and still fund and still get their money, and maybe only 1 out of 100 get shut down by Stripe, then I don't think we'll see anything change in how creators approach it. I think they'll just say, all right, this is a risk that I'm willing to take. And if it's still like that, 99 out of 100, there's probably no need for Kickstarter to really change. They can just blame it on Stripe, hope that it's, usually the smaller projects, give guidance where they can give guidance, or say, oh, maybe you should remove that page or this page, and just say that'll increase the chances that your project is going to get nipped. But if there's 9 out of 10 projects that get shut down, or 8 out of 10 or 7 out of 10, at some point, if it becomes really clear that Stripe is stepping up their monitoring of these projects, well, the balance is going to shift. And then I could see creators making a concerted effort to go elsewhere. So some recommendations that I just have for projects that are trying to launch but are still playing in the not safe for work space is I would definitely make a move to sanitize your Kickstarter page. Make those censor bars probably bigger than you'd want to. You may also want to sanitize your website. So, even if your Kickstarter page is pretty tame, but your website for your publishing company has, a lot of gratuitous stuff, that might be something that you want to clean up a little bit, knowing that Stripe check that as well. I also think some of the strategies of, all right, well, I'm going to upload a very tame version of this when I submit my project to Kickstarter. And then after it's been approved and my Stripe is connected successfully, and then I'm going to bring all that stuff back and put in all the spiciest content. And that's a workaround. Honestly, I don't think that's a workaround because you have no idea when during a campaign that someone at Stripe is going to actually check your Kickstarter page. So I think knowing that you're going to have to list your website or submit a website or submit your page with Stripe, and that they can review what you actually have on your page at any time, that's something that you have to contend with and something that you should keep in mind. So again, I would make sure that you have enough visually compelling imagery and enough of a visually compelling pitch for your project that it could stand on its own, and that the, not safe for work elements and the mature reader elements are just sort of icing on the cake. And honestly, when you look at some of the biggest properties out there, Game of Thrones comes to mind. They are able to do that, right? You can go to Game of Thrones and look at all of HBO's marketing for Game of Thrones, and you won't find anything that would get a Stripe ban in place, right? But again, that's just something to keep in mind as you move forward with this. Couple of comments coming in here. Tom Levine says, has Polito, Shander et al. Commented yet? And what would they do if it happened to them? I mean, that's a great question. I know I've seen Pat Shand just share some stuff publicly that Kickstarter had asked him to tone down some of the images on previous pages that he had submitted. And it seems like he has done that somewhat. I would suggest, when comparing, his latest project with what's going on over at Deep Cover Studios, Pat has clearly gone bigger with his censored bars lately, right? So that's, probably one of his most potentially problematic images right here is mostly censor bars. Clearly hasn't hurt this particular project now that Pat has made a name for himself in Cheeky Comics, but it's definitely going to be something that I'm going to be watching for sure.